Hello, this is ADHD and caffeine for college students. So, what effects do caffeine have on a person with ADHD? First, you have to define what ADHD is. ADHD is attention deficit hyperactive disorder, and it is a neurodevelopmental disorder. This disorder affects the dopamine levels in one's brain, making them lower, having the effects listed below. They are hyper, trouble paying attention, impulsive behavior, and overly active. The cure for this would be stimulants. Caffeine is a stimulant. In a poll with 34 students at Nevada State College, they were asked different questions about how caffeine affects them and if they have been diagnosed with ADHD or ADD. 5 of these students responded with yes. This will be the data I will be analyzing. 3 out of 5 students are full-time students, and they all have different work situations. All 5 are between the ages of 18 through 20, are between the ages of 18 and 30. Caffeine affects them all differently if they drink it. However, as I was analyzing the data and reading how it affects 2 of the comments stood out to me. We asked the questions in a survey saying, in 2 sentences or less, explain why you consume caffeine and how it affects you. These are the individuals with ADHD answers. So one said, it doesn't, if anything, I feel more tired. And the second said, I like the flavor, but caffeine doesn't always affect me. When it does, I'm hyper, but I have a crash where I just don't feel good. This doesn't really happen that often though. So for the first one, as I was reading this, not even checking if they had ADHD or not, I automatically knew they did. This is the response that you could probably guess from somebody that had ADHD. Because caffeine is a stimulant, it then levels out the dopamine levels in a person's brain, making them have a more, quote, chill effect. They can sometimes feel more tired, or they can be able to focus more depending on their specific situation. The second is I like the flavor, but caffeine doesn't always affect me. When it does, I'm hyper and have a crash where I just don't feel good. It doesn't really happen that often though. So depending on what other medications they are on for ADHD and their sort of level of ADHD, if it's mild, moderate, or severe, this could be the answer one would assume. So if they feel hyper, that might be because they consumed a strong amount of caffeine in a short period of time. And the reason why they crash is because then it all goes away very fast in a person that has ADHD. It only has an effect on them so long as a normal person would. However, a person with ADHD, it tends to speed up in the process. These are all of the other questions that we asked, some of them applying to this specific study and some of them applying to other studies that are conducted in this website. So, because there was such a small group of data, it was difficult to get a necessary accurate answer. If I had more questions, I would have enjoyed getting more information and asking, if I had more students, apologies, I would have enjoyed getting more information and asking them different questions. Some of those would be the age they were diagnosed. That can change depending if they were diagnosed at 7 or if they were diagnosed a year ago. The level and the accuracy of their diagnosis would change. Another would be if they are on any other ADHD medications. This would change the effect that caffeine has on a person. Your dopamine levels only need so much of the stimulant. So if you're already on a medication for it, such as Adderall, and you then drink caffeine, because your dopamine levels are already at a stable level, it will then have a regular effect on you. Another would be Do you find that when you drink caffeine, it calms you down or helps you focus more? Sometimes, as we saw before, it will make a person tired. Sometimes they don't have enough. And sometimes, as a person grows, their dopamine levels end up leveling themselves out. That's why it's very uncommon to see ADHD, which is adults with ADHD. All of this information would have been extremely helpful in this process. And if I were to continue on, this is the data that I would be collecting. There were some clear signs of ADHD and the effects on the individuals that we saw. And I would have loved to dig deeper into it. So a clear knowledge of caffeine on ADHD. There is a clear knowledge of caffeine's effect on ADHD by the evidence collected and the questions we asked. Some of them was very clear as it makes me more tired. And some of them you had to give a little bit of grace in saying, oh, well, it might have been this, it might have been this. Or if they had a diagnosis at a very early age, it might not be existent and their dopamine levels may have leveled out. As I said before, if I had been able to ask more follow-up questions, that would have been most ideal in this process. This is what I have so far. I hope you enjoyed this presentation and thank you so much for listening. Goodbye.